Much. I'm so sorry. Hello and welcome to Eden Hall K-12's Programs Office Social Justice and Sustainability Series. Each month is focused on the connections between different environmental issues and the forms of socially based justice. For the month of February, our panel was on community development, ability, age, and justice. My name is Jeremiah Davis, and I'll be your moderator today. This month's panel was assembled with the help of Pittsburghers for Public Transit, Hazelwood Initiative, New Suns Rising, and River Rise. To continue this discussion after today's panel, we encourage everyone to also join us for the discussion group on community development, ability, age, and justice a week from today, on Saturday, March 4th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Next month, we'll also be focusing on ecology and religious justice through similar panels, events, discussion groups, and resource sharing. February is African American History Month, and this month also includes Trans Equity Day of Action, which happened on February 4th in honor of Rosa Parks' birthday, World Interfaith Harmony Week from February 1st to this February 7th, and the World Day of Social Justice, which happened on February 20th. Our speaker this morning are the following. Tiffany Taulton is Director of Community Initiatives at the Hazelwood Initiative Incorporated. Gil Isaac Gabriel is a 12th grader at City Charter High School and an activist for Pittsburghers for Public Transit. Brittany Reno is Executive Director of Sharpsburg Neighborhood Organization and Council President of Sharpsburg Borough. Irv Bailey is Executive Director of Uncommon Grounds Cafe. And I am your moderator today, Jeremiah Davis. In this panel, we'll be covering the intersections of community development, transit, ability, and age and justice. And so to get us started, I wanted to ask you all, starting with Tiffany, and then we'll go in a rotation. Could you all introduce yourselves, the work that you do briefly, and could you give a brief overlook of what your communities look like?
Hi, thanks for having me today. My name's Tiffany Taulton. I'm the Director of Community Initiatives for Hazelwood Initiative Incorporated, which is a community development corporation in the Hazelwood neighborhood of Pittsburgh. Hazelwood is the site of the last steel mill in the city of Pittsburgh, the last brownfield site. So it's undergoing some really big changes right now. It used to have a population of about 13,000 people when the steel mills were at their height, but it's since diminished to about 5,000 today. So it's really a city, a community that has changed. It's about 40% Black, 60% white, and very low income. The average income there is about $24,000. Compared to about $83,000 for a family of four in the city of Pittsburgh. So it's very low income. Our renters in particular, about 55% of them earn less than $15,000 a year. And when you consider that about 75 to 80% of African Americans in our community are renters, then it puts them at a special risk for displacement from gentrification as the community redevelops. And we have the former mill site being converted into a new tech hub now with Carnegie Mellon University there, and their advanced robotics manufacturing and everything else that's going on. But that's why Hazelwood Initiative is here. As the Community Development Corporation, we're here to make sure that we have development without displacement and help the community to stay in the neighborhood by making sure that we keep housing affordable, commercial space affordable for our local entrepreneurs, and working on transportation and environmental issues as well.
Isaac, take it away.
Hi, my name is Isaac Gabriel, and I'm a senior at City Charter High School in downtown Pittsburgh. Class of 2021, represent. Today, I'll be mostly talking about my experience as a commuter from the suburbs to downtown for school. And I used to live in Whitehall in the South Hills of Pittsburgh, which tends to be car-centric and car-dependent. So transit services very much reduced there compared to the city. This is the kind of situation where we see the intersection between transit service and housing, because housing is starting to, we're seeing this demographic trend and shift towards more affordable housing in the suburbs compared to the city, and the transit service being reduced there. And as a result, due to this demographic trend of more people moving into urban areas. And as a result, we see people, or part of the original population in our urban areas being displaced, and which is the issue with transit service, because how are you gonna get out and get around without, if you don't have a car, if you don't have access to good transit. So I volunteer with Pittsburghers for Public Transit as a member and support their work with transit advocacy and related social issues. For example, I recently volunteered to canvass and gather signatures for a petition to implement Brianna's law to stop no-knock warrants, as well as to stop solitary confinement in Allegheny County. While this may not seem to be something related to transit, many issues we face today are intersectional and related, and this kind of work pushes us to move towards the right direction to a better future where gaps between each community and individual are reduced.
Thank you so much, Isaac. Brittany, take it away.
Isaac, you're a tough act to follow. Right on. I'm Brittany Reno. I am the founder and executive director of a nonprofit called Sharpsburg Neighborhood Organization. We try to do the same kind of work that Hazelwood Initiative does in Hazelwood, basically empowering the community to create the community that they want to see and that they can stay in and thrive in. I work in Sharpsburg, which is a riverfront municipality along the Allegheny River. It's right across the river from Lawrenceville and Highland Park. So traditionally, Sharpsburg has been plagued by floods, by disinvestment, but on the plus side, it's been a really affordable place for families to live, especially families with lower incomes. We're in the Fox Chapel School District, which is a well-off school district. So it's been a great affordable way for families of lesser means to get into a great school district, but now we're starting to face those Pittsburgh-wide developmental pressures, and we are working to figure out how we can build a community that people want to see for themselves and their families, but that doesn't push them out. So I've been doing this job since I founded it as a volunteer in 2014, came on board full-time in 2016, and in 2015, I was appointed and then elected to Borough Council. So I'm now the council president in Sharpsburg. So I have the local government hat and the nonprofit hat that I put on. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Brittany and Herb.
Hi, my name is Herb Bailey, and I am the ministry director of Uncommon Grounds Cafe, which is a coffee shop on its face in the middle of the downtown strip of Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. Aliquippa is a town that was built by J&L Steel. Steel mill is obviously, steel is the heart and soul of the Western Pennsylvania area. And it had its heyday, and actually it was known as the place to go. So people from far and wide would come to Aliquippa, if you know the history of this area. When the mill left in the late 70s, early 80s, those who could get out, got out. And what was left was what was under the veneer. So you had all the abuses and all the vices of life that were left. And so part of the call of Uncommon Grounds Cafe is to walk with people from isolation back into community. We do that through partnerships with somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or 40 different organizations as we interact and listen to people, offering them dignity. I'm also the chair of the FADC, Franklin Avenue Development Committee. And so part of our call is to bring new business, new life, and new opportunity to the downtown corridor. We have a garden and a greenhouse where we do urban gardening. We have a city park on Franklin Avenue that we're in the beginning stages of developing. And we just do everything from recovery to replacement to jail ministry to restorative justice, reducing recidivism rates, mentoring, hiring folks. We throw block parties. Last night we had a phenomenal Black History Month initiative. So there were spoken word artists that came from the city, from around the area, and we just put on events where people can come and celebrate life.
Thank you all so much for telling me about your work and your communities. That brings me to talking about have you all talking about the effects of bad development in the past and how that influences where we are today and impacts your work. So, Tiffany, if you could start, and then we can take it off from there. Could you talk more about Hazelwood and the development of Hazelwood's path?
So as I mentioned before, Hazelwood was the site of the last steel mill in the city of Pittsburgh. It was the Jones and Laughlin, the J&L steel mill, and then became LTV. That closed in 1998 finally. And basically the site just sat vacant for about 20 something years. And then a few years ago, it finally started to see some development. One of the unique things about Hazelwood is that the site was actually controlled by a group of 4 foundations. And so it's called Almano, Allegheny, Mon, Ohio, Almano site. And these foundations really focused on making sure that whatever came to the site eventually would hopefully benefit the community. They didn't want it to be just a site where any developer would come and just displace the community. So that has been their focus all along. And that makes Hazelwood a little bit unique in terms of development after steel. It's been a slow process, and I'm actually quite thankful for that, because I think it would be really hard to stem displacement if it was happening faster than it currently is. It is the site that some people may know as one of the potential sites for Amazon HQ2, the Amazon headquarters when they were looking. And that did stir some early speculation of people buying up properties and, some people being displaced because of that. But it's slowed down, and now it's really become the site of this, new technological revolution, and bringing in groups from Silicon Valley and Carnegie Mellon University with their advanced robotics manufacturing and Uber. And so now what our organization is doing is really just trying to focus on making sure that we acquire as much of the neighborhood as possible, especially sites that are significant to the community. So we've purchased the former Bergwin School, which is now where Propel Charter School is located. We've purchased the former Gladstone School building, and we're in the process of converting that into over 50 affordable, permanently affordable rental units for the community. We've purchased, we're purchasing over 60 homes, low-income homes from one of the major landlords in the community that's kind of, partially retiring and wants those homes to stay in the community. So we're really just focused on making sure that we have affordable housing options for community members to stay, as well as purchasing a lot of properties along 2nd Avenue so that our business owners can stay and we keep the rents, affordable for them. We're also working with our renters to convert as many as we can into homeowners, because that's really the path to stability and, generational wealth building, to get them into those homes where they can have equity and then, have money to set aside for college or, put up for college. And that involves, working with people. We're working with Circles, which is now called Catapult, getting people through credit repair programs, working with Daniel with the Davis Consulting Solutions and Poor Law to do workforce development and get people into interviews, help them with resumes, and really just working on all of the aspects that help a community to get back on its feet. We also attend meetings of Pittsburghers for Public Transit and the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, Port Authority, looking at transportation issues, because as you might imagine, if you lose 65% of your population and you lose all your grocery stores and you lose your movie theaters and you lose, you don't have a lot of transportation options either. It wasn't until, several years of advocacy that just in November, we had the 93 bus service restored to weekend service so people can get to their jobs on the weekend. So, these bus issues are something that's important to us. And then, moving now as our organization has grown for the first, our organization is about 22 years, is going on 22 years now. But it wasn't until this real push for development came that we became a CDC. We were initially a neighborhood cleanup group. So it's been a lot of change from going from an all volunteer base to an executive director and 2 staff to having 6 staff now. And I'm one of the newer hires. I started in October of 2020, so of 2019, so right before the pandemic, doing community engagement and outreach and managing grants. And my background is in environmental policy and climate change. So I'm also really concerned with making sure that the neighborhood is not only a place where people can stay, but where they want to stay, and that they have green spaces, especially now with COVID keeping so many people trapped indoors, that they have green spaces that they can go outside safely, take those walks through the forest, get the forest bathing, relieve the stress, and look at the, remediation of some of the environmental stressors on the community, which include continued poor air quality and high rates of asthma. So we're really happy to be working with partners like Venture Outdoors and the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy, and to receive grants recently from the Trust for Public Lands to improve our greenway, and from Tree Pittsburgh and Tree Vitalize to regreen the neighborhood and relief it.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, and the rest of your panelists. Feel free to jump on. I saw some head nods, some agreement. So if you have anything to say, just feel free to jump on and we can take the conversation there.
It's hard to focus on just one issue, and like, how many issues Tiffany just alluded to. It's because they're all, like Isaac said, hitting the nail on the head, they're all totally related to each other, because it doesn't seem like food access is related to public transit necessarily. It doesn't seem like air quality or greenhouse gas emissions are related to transit, or workforce security, access to opportunity. All of these things are related to transit, and they're related to everything else too. And that's why I love this work. And I think a lot of kids don't know that this is a field that they can go into. It's not like this is a typical person, I think, that shows up at a career day. And I didn't know this existed until after college, this kind of work, but I think it's so meaningful. And this is the way you don't just impact, 1 or 2 lives, you can change entire systems and fix things that have been broken or poorly designed for a long time. So bad development, like cutting a highway through a residential neighborhood that then makes it flood and suffer more greatly from air pollution issues that they're already predisposed to because of their downwind position from an industrial plant. That kind of thing. I don't know that it was done in the 60s and so accidentally. People knew which communities they were cutting through. They knew which houses they were demolishing to put in highways. So working with communities that have been affected by transportation decisions in the past in that way, to remind them that they do have power, and that if they don't have the power, then let's rally together and be loud and get that power back. That I think is an important part of our work.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about the level of work and the importance. I think about the work that there were a group of people when J&L finally closed in Aliquippa. They were trying to not give people their pensions, right? And they were trying to basically rob the people. They laid off somewhere close to 4,000 people. So just all of a sudden, from being currently employed to being unemployed. And there were people called the fisher folk who lived in downtown Aliquippa who actually fought for the people to get their pensions, and so they had the wherewithal. And so it's interesting to have a community come together, and there being perhaps a point person that says, "Hey, we care enough to speak up." And so that's what's beautiful about what you guys are doing, both in what you're doing in Sharpsburg, what you're doing with the Pittsburgh for public transit, what you're doing in Hazelwood. Like, those things are how people get involved, and we need those voices, those irritants that are like, yeah, I'm going to get involved and I'm going to say something because someone needs to speak up for the little guy. In '84, when the steel mill left, the population of Aliquippa went from being 20,000 people and it dropped down to what it is now, around 9,000 people. At one point, we serviced upwards of 100,000 people. Right, like that's insane. We went from 100,000 people to what now we have 9,000 people in Aliquippa. We have around a 50% tax base. So that means that 50% of the people are paying taxes. And then you wonder why your transit's messed up, your school is messed up, your roads are messed up, and the things that are publicly funded struggle. And so your infrastructure struggles because people can't afford to pay taxes because they don't have jobs, right? So one of the concerns, and this is we're talking about development. And again, there's so many things that Tiffany, you brought up. When we're talking about development moving forward, one of the things that I'd like to advocate for is a diverse economic base. And so the source of the solution is not the same source of the problem. The problem, at least in Aliquippa, which is just northwest of Pittsburgh on the Ohio River, is we are a one-trick pony, to use that language. There was only one business in town. And so if all the business and all the people are employed by one business, if that business has a run-in with a horrible adventure and has to suddenly pull out, then you've just left people with nothing. So one of the many things that we get to do is partner with economic change agent. So we have a young man, Zabrion, who comes in and he is an entrepreneur, and he's like, how do we start businesses and how do we support that? So part of what FADC, Franklin Avenue Development Corporation or Committee, FADC, you can look us up on Facebook. One of the things we're doing is we are trying to woo entrepreneurs onto Franklin Avenue. So you have your own business, and if your business is not foot traffic only, if your business is something that can be shipped, because as we know, part of this coronavirus and this pandemic is that people are moving steadily away from face-to-face interaction and more interactions just like this, right? So how do we see the future and plan for it? And it's important that we get outside. It doesn't change It doesn't change the necessity of us getting outside and having green spaces and getting together. But we also need to look at the economic base and say, okay, so what does the future look like? And how do we have a global experience that Aliquippa can tap into? So what are things that we can make in-house that expands that? So that's one aspect. So how do we subvert the transportation issue? All right, so if you're not going to fix that, we're still going to get paid. We're still going to find solutions to what ails us. While you're working on that, we're not going to wait on you to get that done. We're going to raise up people to learn. We're right now, kids are learning coding. That's one of the classes that's happening at the cafe. They're learning coding. You know, you're 14 years, I don't know how to code. I'm watching it happen. I still don't know how. I have to call my daughter to fix the Roku and make sure that I can use the remote to turn the volume down on my TV with my, so I know I don't have the technology, but there are people who are coming behind me. And if I make room for them to be successful, right? How do we bring them to a place where they're better than we are?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with your point about, you know, how powerful the youth is. They are our future, and there's so many things that they can do that is just so powerful. Transit service is one of those things, you know. Transit service is downtown centric, and you know, for me, like in my experience, as someone who used to live further in the suburbs, like getting around is difficult, and as a result of, you know, bad development and planning, because the suburbs, as you know, are car centric, and it doesn't help that our current transit service in the region is you know, more downtown centric, working class centric, which is not a bad thing. I think but I think it can be improved. So to get to Oakland and hanging out with friends on a summer day without a car, I would have to take about 40 minutes to get downtown and another 25 minutes to get to Oakland. So it's good service for those who work downtown, but it's only for that matter. And transit service really shouldn't be just getting to and from work. It should be, going to the grocery store, or going to your doctor, going to everywhere without the need for a car. So, and another thing about that is children and youth. How are they going to get around with such transit service? Children cannot operate cars. They can ride buses. So I think it would be great if development and planning also consider the children and youth in their work to ensure our cities and environment works for everyone.
Thank you so much, Isaac. And exactly the importance of transit. I'll pose another question to the panelists, and anybody could respond and have another conversation. Could you talk about the intersections of transit as it relates to people's housing? And we already hit on unemployment, but there's a whole bunch of ways, and like Isaac, I was talking about with you, that transit intersects with many parts of people's lives. So could you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the great thing about cities is that they're great places for people who don't have a ton of money to live and be able to access resources, to be able to access transit. And increasingly, we are seeing that cities are becoming more and more popular, especially with young, wealthier people, really wealthier people of all age, but people of all sorts want to live in cities, and that's great for the tax base of a city, but it's not great for the people who are being displaced by people who are willing to pay 2 or 3 times as much for the same 1-bedroom apartment. So it's tough because even rich people who can't afford to use a car want to live in a place that's densely built and has transit access. And I think that is a nut we're all working to crack still. And so I think it's really important to work on housing and transit together. And frankly, housing needs to be handled first. We have a huge dearth of affordable housing. We do not have enough affordable housing in the city, in the county, and there needs to be a more concerted effort from the top down and from the bottom up to maintain that affordable housing, because just building up the amenities and hoping that somewhere down the line we'll work out the affordable housing issue does not seem like it's going to be able to work. And at the very least, it's going to be a much more expensive way to tackle the problem.
Yeah, there is a necessity for affordable housing, and I think it's a twofold issue, right? One part is affordable housing, and the other part is raising the standard of living for people so that there's an old adage that says the poor we will always have around us, among us. Right. And what that means is, for at least from one perspective, it gives us a focal point for charity. It gives us a focal point for caring for others and not being selfish. Right. Like I can think of other people. I can think of the needs of others. So how do we then do that? How do we help them rise up so that they can take that place? One of the struggles that we have in Aliquippa is there are people who inherited homes. But they don't have the financial wherewithal to maintain the homes, right? So you live in a home and you can't do the upkeep, so you leave the home. Then the home is abandoned and it continues to fall and collapse. So how do we encourage and engage people so that they know how to not only are we putting people in homes, like, oh, now you have affordable housing. Do you know how to keep up a house? Do you have the wherewithal? Like we saw the housing crash that happened at the turn of the century. where people were buying homes because their interest rates were so low and they were ripping people off basically left and right. Like, hey, you can buy a home with only $2 down and you can afford it. It's an adjustable interest rate and you can move in. It's going to be fine. And then as the bubble burst, your interest rate went up from 3% to 15% to 20% to 40%, and you can't afford the home. So people are foreclosing on homes. How do we then actually care about the future of people and not just ripping them off? And and unfortunately, we talked about this a couple of days ago. We live in a society that says, I can take as long as I can take advantage of someone and justify it, then I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Right? Like that's the kind of world we live in. That's our situation. Is if I can take advantage of you and get away with it, I will. And so we need gatekeepers. We need people who are on the towers who are shouting, hey, that's not right. There are people who are missing it. There are people who actually don't have a voice. And so we're going to speak out for them. Part of the issue is if we're going to have housing for folks, are we helping them learn how to care for their homes? Are we helping them learn how to manage their finances? Right? That's equally as important. You give a man a fish. You've heard that. I think, is that still relevant? Give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach him how to fish, he lives forever. The problem is, and here's the problem, you can teach a man how to fish, but if he doesn't own the pond, right? Oh yeah, I got a great fishing. I know how to fish. I don't own a reel, right? So those are the pieces, like full education and ownership, both and not either or. It's complicated, but it's intentional, and it needs to be complicated. If we come up with an easy solution, then if it looks too simple, then it probably is.
Yeah, I think there are so many aspects to everything you said. I hope I don't forget what I want to say about it. But I think, there's a couple of things. One, yes, people need to be taught how to care for a home. That's one of the reasons we created an incubator program in Hazelwood, where we have an incubator duplex structure that people can move into and learn how to take care of a house while they're saving in order to get their down payment. So they go through the credit repair program. They're just about ready. They still have some money they need to get ready for the deposit, and they can stay in the incubator house for a year or two. While they, part of the rent for that house goes towards their future home, and they get to learn, the ins and outs of taking care of a house and being in there. But part of it is we really need to look at what kind of society we have and what kind of society we want. We are now at a state in the city of Pittsburgh and nationally where I think 52% of people are renters. So there needs to be some recognition that just because you are a renter does not mean you are unworthy of existing. It's the same kind of recognition that needs to go to our essential workers, where we all agree that they are essential and our society collapses if they don't work. And yet we feel like they are unworthy of a wage that allows them to live and feed themselves and their families. So, we need to talk more about having a base level for everyone, that everyone deserves to have housing and food and clothing and air that they can breathe. So I think, these are some larger questions that we need to address. But I also want to get back to Herbert's point about diversification of the economy. I think that there can be some focus on, we have to get those people that are poor to have these high paying jobs that require 8 or 12 years of college. And unless they're willing to go through that, then they deserve to starve. So I think, there's two areas there. One, everyone deserves a living wage. And two, we need to remember that not everyone has to go to college. Coding is great for some people. There are a lot of people that are not going to want to sit in front of a computer all day. And so we need to look at some of those other jobs. Right now, I believe there is a shortage of, people that are in the trades. And I'm really in favor of getting more of those jobs for people in communities like ours, and getting them on their feet quickly and getting students to realize they don't have to go to college. I think there needs to be some changes in terms of making it easier to get into these trade schools, easier to get into unions. There are some background issues that keep a lot of people out, and those were intentionally put there. And that system needs to change. And so one of the things that we're looking at here in Hazelwood is, yes, we have a tech hub getting built right on Hazelwood Green. Is everyone going to be able to get a job there, especially a community that has no public schools and hasn't for a while? And a lot of kids never do get that chance to, if they get out of high school, that's great. College is such a far thing. So looking at other kinds of jobs that they can do, whether it's in the trades or, in green technology and green areas, as we're looking at improving our greenway, I'm looking at, well, can we get people to be forest rangers? The Biden administration is talking about having a new civilian conservation corps, doing the work of the former Public Works Administration, rebuilding our infrastructure in this country. We know the infrastructure is crumbling as we have climate change and we see landslides and roads and bridges being washed away and tornadoes and hurricanes tearing down trees and homes. We need people that have skills for that as well, for that disaster emergency management, for infrastructure, for rebuilding communities, not only for coding, not only for these college degree jobs. So just remembering that we need a variety of employment for our people, I think is important.
I completely agree with you.
So you made a great point about the question of the fact that our rent in the city of Pittsburgh or in the region, the majority of our population are renters, and you said 52% are renters, and it just makes me wonder, there seems to be this disconnect between renters and owners in the question of, are they part of the community? And I think it's a huge problem because the majority of our people are renters, and civic engagement is also important. And I definitely feel when we used to rent, I definitely felt a sense of disconnection to my community. I felt like I wasn't part of it. So I wonder how we could change that. How does that translate to civic engagement?
And while we're on the topic of housing really quick, something I've been grappling with is this whole system that we have of generating wealth based around housing, buying a house and selling it at a more expensive rate. It seems like it's quite designed to price people out of the system, and I'm coming to the conclusion that it is not a sustainable way to ensure success for people, requiring them to buy a house while they're paying $1,000 a month towards rent, trying to save up for a down payment, and then selling it to the next sucker for $300,000 when they bought it for $150,000. It just doesn't seem sustainable.
We watched that happen in Nashville. So I moved to the Pittsburgh area from Nashville about 10 years ago. And it was right after a catastrophe that the housing market had a boom. There was a tornado that came through downtown Nashville and through the northeast side of Nashville. And there were a lot of old homes, and people came in and they began to buy up the homes, and where you could live, whether it was renting for $300 a month or living in a home that was $100,000. My wife and I experienced directly living in a home, a 3-bedroom, 1-bath home, and we were paying maybe $600 a month. The landlord came to us and said that he was raising the rent and that we would have to move. He didn't give us an option of matching his rent. That house now, as of probably 6 years ago, sold for $400,000. right? So we moved from close to downtown to outside of this little neighborhood to the outside edge of this neighborhood, almost to the next county over, because of that very, and the word that we don't like to talk about, Brittany, and this is a scary thing, but the word we don't like to talk about is the word greed, right? Like what is capitalism that has no limits on it? And again, so someone asked a question, I think it was Taji, I don't know, I'm pronouncing Taji's name wrong, Nelson. What should our demands to elected officials be? And are there other important decisions makers we should be engaging? Can I answer that question, Jeremiah? Yes. Okay. Thanks. I hit the live button. I think part of that is if we have systems in place that if we are going to put pressure on our elected officials, we need to put pressure on our elected officials to listen to the little guy. It's going to be easy. Their ears are going to be bent to the people who have money. That's guaranteed. Every single time corporations are considered individuals, right? So like we already know the system is skewed for those who have the most, but those who have the most are the fewest in number. That's just the reality of the situation. And those who have the most are the fewest in number. Those who have the least are the largest in number, but don't voice. And so that's where the advocacy comes in. And so and I know this is for youth. If you care about fairness, this is what this is about. We're talking about fair, and we know it's not fair. Right. So this is where your sense of justice or your being incensed about injustice comes into play. And so I call up Connor Lamb and I say, Connor, let me tell you what the people on the street are saying, because you need to hear what they're saying. You need to know. And so Connor invited my wife and I, and so we go to his office in DC, and we're sitting with him and all of the interns around, and we're telling the narratives of what's happening in our community. They need to hear that. They need to hear that, a jeweler, that folks don't own property. And if you don't own property, you can be moved out. But what they also need to hear is that we need to figure out a different way of moving taxes around so that the tax base doesn't increase. Can you be grandfathered in at a tax base? Like, I've been paying this amount on my taxes. And so if the taxes get raised and I'm in a house and I am 75, 80 years old living in a home, do my taxes need to go up because my home value has gone up? And so you're assessing it based on some arbitrary numbers that have nothing to do with the reality of my actual property. Because someone else is willing to pay 4 times what I paid for my house doesn't mean that I now need to pay the taxes based on your 4 times. Right? Like that's the reality of the situation. But if those voices aren't heard, right? And I know that we live in a post-religious society, but there are still people who talk to their pastors, and pastors still have voices, right? The barber still has voices. The bartender gets to hear a whole lot of conversation, right? And they carry these narratives, they carry these stories. Are we listening to them? Are we listening to those stories? Are we sourcing them for a narrative that folks in ivory towers don't hear?
Yeah, I think that that's really, part of the key to it, and the question that Gil asked. There's often a lot of talk that puts it like, I am giving voice to the voiceless, and I really don't actually like that, because everyone has a voice, but not everyone is listened to, right? And so there are a lot of people that are being ignored right now. And one of the reasons that renters don't feel like they're part of the community is because they are routinely ignored. People don't treat them like they're part of the community. For example, when we have these programs to talk about, solar panels or getting lead pipes removed from your house, if you're a renter, you have no say in that. You don't own the home. You don't get to say, oh, I believe in clean energy. I'd like to have solar panels on my house and not use, dirty fossil fuels for my heating. You don't get a choice in that. If your landlord doesn't, respond to the city's call about getting the lead pipes replaced for free, you don't get a choice in that. Nobody tells you that the city sent a letter to your landlord and asked them if they would like their pipes replaced while they're working on your street. You have no idea of knowing whether or not your landlord responded to that inquiry by the city to get your pipes replaced. And so you're stuck in your house with your dirty, polluting energy, with your lead pipes that's poisoning your family, because you're a renter. So nobody's going to listen to you. Nobody's going to share that information with you. How do you become a part of it? You have a lot of groups that, and a lot of development, a lot of city, activities take place during working hours. So you're going to have a public hearing to say, what do you think about this development going on in your community at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 11 o'clock in the morning? Who's going to go to that? The renter that's working 2-3 jobs, trying to take care of their kids. Now their kids are homeschooled and they're trying to figure out how they're not going to get evicted, and their grandmother's got COVID and they're stressed out about a million other things. Are they going to be going to these meetings where they know that even if they show up, and many of them have shown up for years, and still the project went through, so they've been burned before and they have no trust in the government? That's why people don't feel like they belong. So if we want people to belong, we need to be honest with them, and we need to make a real effort to include them, which means paying them for their time when they're giving their opinions, just like you pay experts. It means having meetings at times when they can actually attend. And it means giving renters a voice in the kind of community that they live in. And the government can take a stand in that and just say everybody has to have pipes that are clean and not poisoning their children. Everybody gets clean energy, whether you own the home or not. That's a societal change that has to take place.
Yeah, and I feel like it's going to be just me and you, Tiffany, talking. So I'm trying to like censor myself, but this is so good, right? It really is. But the question is, and we talked about this before, but what are the incremental steps? Because I can see the big picture, right? Like I know the big picture. The big picture is there's equity. Like that's number one is equity. Number two, there's interest. So if those who aren't heard, how do we give them this level of interest? Like you have something of value when you're transitory, right? There's in poverty, in some of the poverty language and poverty training that we do, we talk about the tyranny of the now. So you were talking about like my grandmother is sick, I'm working and I've got a child at home and I've got to find housing, I've got to find to take care of my housing, I've got to pay my bills, I've got to get to work, and Lord, don't let my kid get sick, right? Because I'm only making just above minimum wage and I can only make a couple of mistakes. Now you want to talk about lead pipes. Now you want to talk about clean energy. I don't care about clean energy. I care about clean diapers, right? I don't even care about clean eating. I just want to make sure that CYS doesn't come and take my kids because I'm not feeding them. That's what I actually care about, the tyranny of the now. So like ideally, and we can idealize all day long, and that's an important part of it, right? That's an important part to go, this is the standard. But until we go, okay, well, this is where we are and this is the standard, there's so many steps in between. I don't want to continue to be a voice yelling out into the wilderness. Like, make change needs to happen, How do we walk with people, be present with people? You're an individual, and we need all of those things. We need systems changed. We also need individual hearts changed. So those who are middle-class folk, not at the top, not the bottom, whatever that is, are like, you know what? I've got a few resources. I'm going to use my few resources, my little bit of time to walk with somebody. I'm going to help that mom out, right? There was a narratives, the stories are how I get along. It's how I get by. There was a woman who put a beat out on our Beaver County needs page. And she said, I'm pregnant and I have a flat tire and I don't have any money. So somebody messaged me and said, hey, Herb, there is a woman who has a flat tire and she's pregnant and she doesn't have any money. So I showed up and I changed her frickin' tire. Can I say frickin'? I changed her frickin' tire. It was too late now. I already said it. I'm a pastor. Don't tell anybody I said frickin'. I said it again. All right. I changed her tire. And she is saying, I am pregnant and I don't want to have this baby because the father's baby is addicted to drugs. And I don't want my family, I don't want to grow up and have this. So she is in a spot. And I'm not saying have the abortion, don't have the abortion. What I'm saying is she's in a spot of isolation. And she needs someone with her. She is in a tyranny now. Like right now, all she's thinking about is how do I get home to my child? I've got a flat tire and I'm pregnant. Oh, equity, air quality. Like at some point that's gonna matter, but right now she needs her tire changed, right? Like how do we do both of those? How do we hold that tension of the future and now? Right? That's the problem. And that's why we have this disconnect, because we end up yelling into a void. And there are people like, I don't know what y'all yelling about. Right now, I'm trying to get that dollar special at McDonald's. I heard they got Big Macs, you know, I'm trying to feed, like, so how do we do that? How do we do that? One person at a time. How do we do that? Two people at a time. How do we do that? Let me teach you how to garden. How do we do that? Here is a garden box you can plant in your house. Here are some instructions on how to grow the vegetables. Here are some classes. I will come to your house and teach you how to cook. We'll set up a block party where we will bring a grill out and we will cook the vegetables we taught you how to grow. That's how change, it has to happen incrementally. It has to, and we have to be in for the long haul. I'm done. I feel like I've talked way too much. I'm not going to say anything else the rest of this time. I'm done.
I'm just so happy that you brought it there. You know, because I think sometimes, you know, I definitely am one of those big picture people. And it is important to really pace out those steps in between. And what you said is exactly right. And I just want to make sure people are, you know, really emphasizing that point, that what Herb said is that sometimes a little bit goes a long way, you know, like, especially when you know, I hate to bring it up, but those commercials where they're like, oh, $1 a day and you can help some kid in some country. And I'm like, man, $1 a day won't do anything here, you know, but it still can help, you know, little things help a lot, you know, like we have, you know, if people are looking to help, like one of the things that we're doing here in Hazelwood is we have converted our neighborhood investment fund grant, which is the money that we use from the rent that Propel pays for the school that we own. Traditionally, that money was for community groups to do an activity like, you know, have a Halloween event or have a turkey giveaway or backpack giveaway, you know, a community building party. Obviously, we can't get together now. And so we've converted the entirety of that into assisting people through the COVID crisis. So we give them up to $1,000 for rent, mortgage, utilities, property taxes. Some of our older, you know, members, they own their house, but the taxes are, you know, a challenge. And so helping them with that. And then we even have, you know, a $200 gift certificate that we give people for basic needs. So they could go to like Giant Eagle, Walmart, Aldi's, Target, get food, diapers, milk. A lot of people are purchasing it for underwear and winter clothes at this point. And so if you want to donate to Hazelwood Initiative, you can just, you know, write a check to Hazelwood Initiative, Inc. and send it to our address, which is on our website, 4901 2nd Avenue, 2nd floor, Pittsburgh, PA 15207. But, you know, like I said, it can be really small things. I have had people calling me this week crying over that $200 in gift certificates because they did not know how they were going to feed their kid that day. You know, so it doesn't have to be some grand gesture all the time that we have to give everybody, you know, a $200,000 PPP loan. You know, like some of these businesses in our neighborhood, like $5,000 will keep them in business. you know, and making it hard for them to get that $5,000 does no service to anyone, right? So I just, you know, I encourage people to think about the little things that you can do to make somebody's life better. Like a woman, you know, whose car broke down and she just needs her tire fixed so that she can get to her job and take care of her kids. Like that can be a huge thing. And so I just want to remind people of that, you know, you can make people get involved in that way. And again, for Gil's question, you know, getting people out to these community meetings, I'm often asked, well, how do you get more people to community meetings? And, you know, with all the issues that we've mentioned before, and that you know, people are focused on the now. Why are we even trying to get them to talk about some building that might be built 2 years from now, right? That they're not going to be able to afford to live in anyway. You know, part of that is going to where people are, meeting them where they are, right? So if people are working and they can't make your meeting at 5 o'clock, have your meeting at 6 o'clock and serve food and have childcare so they don't have to worry about those things, right? If they have things that they need to go to the school meeting and ask if you can have 15 minutes of the school's time and make your pitch there, right? If they're at the playground, go to the playground and play with the kids and talk to the parents that are sitting on the benches and get your information there. And if they're focused on asthma, talk about asthma and air quality. Don't just talk about air quality for the sake of air quality, right? We have a highway going down our business district. We have diesel trucks coming from all over the state going down our business district and trains behind it. You know, people don't care about trains. People don't care about trucks. What they care about is, can their kids cross the street safely to go to school? And are they going to have to take off work and lose money that could be paying their rent because their kid has an asthma attack? That's what you need to talk about.
Thank you,
Meet people
Tiffany. I
where
want
they
to
are.
bring in Brittany and Isaac into the conversation a little bit more, and we may go over a little bit over 5 minutes. I hope that's all right, because this has been a rock star panel, and I would love to hear from everybody. So if that's all right, we go 5 minutes, a little bit over. I hope that's okay.
I wish we could go over 2 or 3 hours because I think we got a lot to talk about. We didn't get through half your questions, Jeremiah. But
It's quite all right. The
I
general
wanna
theme is all that counts.
I want to address a couple of the questions I'm seeing in the Q&A. Taiji's question about what we should be demanding of elected officials. Are there other important decision makers we should be engaging? I think we don't have a very robust countywide affordable housing strategy. So we have 130 different municipalities, including the city of Pittsburgh, trying to cobble together their own affordable housing strategies, which, you know, at a scale that small, with resources that few, is not very effective. You know, I'm working on affordable housing in Sharpsburg by partnering with the land bank, by partnering with the community land trust, and we've got one house in the land trust pipeline because it's just that hard to secure affordable housing at a cost that nonprofits can afford right now. So what are we doing in the second ring suburbs and in the third ring suburbs to ensure that as this market growth spreads, we're not just pushing people further and further away from resources that they can access? So I think we demand at the county level affordable housing strategy and action and metrics that we're actually tracking, funding allocated specifically for affordable housing initiatives. At the state level, we don't have rent control. A lot of states do, and it protects people from having their rent jacked up 200, 300%. So advocating at the state level for those kind of protections for and funding for new parents, for childcare. We in Pennsylvania seem to criminally underinvest in our own future, which is a recipe for disaster. We need to support new parents. We need to support workers' rights. So many other things that we've already talked about a little bit. And then on the classist education system, we fund our schools based on how expensive the houses are in a place. So we're guaranteeing that the schools that are teaching the kids with the least resources are going to have even fewer resources. It's like, what do we expect to happen when we're building systems that are designed to perpetuate these things? So that's my rant. And my last point will be, if you care enough about these issues and are invested enough to be watching a webinar at 11 a.m. on a Saturday about these things, run for office. It is so much easier, especially in these municipalities outside of the city, to run for office and make changes yourself than it is to convince people in office to do the right thing. It's not that hard to run for office in these small municipalities with very low, sadly low voter participation rates. Get out there, knock doors, get the 100 votes, and serve the people yourself.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Isaac, take it away. I know you've been doing a lot about in activism with a whole bunch of things, and you can talk a lot about this. So give me some thoughts.
Yeah, I have to say, as someone who doesn't have a lot of experience in this realm of work, I get overwhelmed a lot when I'm with people who have a lot of experiences. And I'm gonna admit, this is one of those times. But it's important to understand that for people my age, we have a world ahead of us. We're young, we're inexperienced. That's okay. I definitely learned a lot today about our community here in the region, and with this panel, and in the grand scheme of things, I have more to learn. Just like Tiffany said, a little goes such a long way. The smallest things can really impact the world. Just like, let's see, relating to transit. How being just 1 minute late can cause you to miss your bus and be late by a tremendous amount to school and work. A whole nother conversation, but it's okay to start with little things like attending this webinar, and maybe this could inspire you to be part of the conversation, and maybe, just like Brittany said, run for office.
Exactly, Isaac, and we need more young people. We need more people involved, and it's the little actions that cause system change. I heard one of my professors say, it is systems changed by one small action in a small little ocean causes ripples, and those ripples can cause a wave to happen. And so hopefully we can make a wave of societal systems change for a better world. And so in our last couple minutes, if anyone have any last couple words while we close out, I just want to thank you all for taking some time out your day and even going over a little bit. So any last thoughts before we close out?
I just want to thank you for inviting me to this panel. It was really great to hear from everyone. I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope that all of the listeners enjoyed it and that they look us up. We're definitely, I'll speak for myself. I'm definitely willing to talk to you more about what's going on in Hazelwood. Come out and view our community. We're having a series of hikes to explore our Greenway and talk about improving it. So if you're interested in sustainability, you're interested in the neighborhood of Hazelwood and what happens to a community after steel leaves, I'm more than willing to meet you socially distant outside. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else before we close out? We have a couple more minutes.
I said I wasn't going to say anything else, but this is the closing remarks. I know. Look, Brittany's like, he said it. I couldn't help it. The two guys are walking along the beach, and the beach is awash. It's full of starfish. And one of the guys bends over and picks up a starfish and throws it back into the ocean. And they walk a little bit further, and he picks up another starfish and throws it back in the ocean. And his buddy goes, "Man, what are you doing? Look at all these starfish, man. There's no way you're going to get, no way you're going to make a difference." He picks up another starfish and throws it in. He goes, "It makes a difference to that one," right? So each one of us can make a difference. Come visit us in Aliquippa. It's Beaver County. The coffee shop, we're doing food truck events on Thursday nights, once a month. 5 of those. We'll have all kinds of events in the park. Look us up. Come have fun. Come celebrate life.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you all the attendees and our panelists for your time and your morning, and for even us going over a little bit. We really appreciate it. And again, I want to invite everybody from 1 week from today on March 4th, Saturday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. We'll be discussing, we'll have a continuation discussion group about all the topics we talked about this morning. So if you're interested in that, make sure you sign up. Again, it's 1 week from today at 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. And you can continue this wonderful conversation on community development, ability, age, and justice. And I just want to thank you all for such a great panelist. And I hope all the attendees learned something and was inspired for that system social change we desperately need it. So thank you all. And thank you all for attending Eden Hall Programs Office Social Justice and Sustainability Series and February's panel on community development. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.